Wife forced to serve. Drinks at husband's party. Guests stood up. When her real identity hit the screen. Marissa Caldwell's hands trembled under the weight of a silver tray. Bourbon, sparkling water, 2 martinis, while a borrowed catering apron scratched her neck. This was Blake Harrington's party. His music, his clients, his smiling photos on the step and repeat. And she was the wife he'd parked behind the bar like an embarrassment. Blake strolled up in his tailored suit, all teeth and charm, and tapped the microphone. The room quieted the way money always makes people quiet. He slipped an arm around a woman in a red dress, Sienna, the one who'd been just a donor contact last month, and lifted his glass. "Smile, sweetheart," Blake said, loud and bright, turning his head so everyone could see Marissa in the apron. This is the only job you're qualified for." Laughter popped like champagne. A few guests glanced away, pretending they hadn't seen. Others leaned in, eager, like cruelty was entertainment. Marissa's wedding ring pressed cold against the latex glove as she reached for another drink ticket. She kept her eyes down because the moment she looked up, she knew she'd cry. And Blake lived for that. Behind her, a security guard stood by the service door, arms folded, watching the bar like she might steal a bottle. She couldn't walk off without someone grabbing her elbow and whispering, "Ma'am, you can't be back here." Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She didn't have permission to check it, Blake's rule. But the screen lit through the fabric anyway, and she saw the preview. Voicemail, 9:12 p.m., Sienna. "Room 1214 is ready. Don't bring her. Paz, I'm tired of the act." Marissa's stomach dropped so hard she almost spilled the tray. She steadied it by squeezing her fingers until the glove bit her skin. On the counter beside the ice well sat a hotel keycard envelope with Blake's initials written in black marker, 1214. Like it was normal, like none of this mattered. Across the ballroom, guests began to murmur, shifting in their seats, turning their heads toward the bar, because something had just changed on the security monitor near the manager's station. The head of security quietly saved the bar camera footage to a flash drive and tucked it into his pocket. Marissa Caldwell wasn't supposed to be at a luxury hotel on a Friday night. She was supposed to be at St. Agnes Medical, filing discharge papers and answering call lights with a calm voice that made scared families breathe again. She'd worked the night shift for 7 years because it paid a little more and because it let her take her dad to his memory care appointments during the day. Tonight she'd rushed from the hospital bathroom, scrubbing pen marks off her hands, changing into the only black dress she owned. In the parking lot, she'd stopped at her dented sedan to check her son's inhaler twice, then slipped a grocery envelope of copays into her purse like a secret. Blake hated seeing bills. He said they were negative energy. She'd hidden her father's facility invoice in that envelope, along with the pharmacy receipt for her son's nebulizer refills, hoping she could pay them before the next late notice arrived. At home, he'd been waiting in the foyer with his tie already knotted, eyes sharp. "You're late," he'd said, and even though he'd never once asked about her shift. When she reached for her purse, he'd casually taken it, opened it, and removed her debit card. "We're not having you embarrass me," he'd murmured, and replaced it with a single hotel keycard. "Just smile, do what you're told." Marissa had swallowed every protest. The last time she'd argued, Blake had called her unstable in front of his mother and threatened to handle custody the right way. Her family lived 3 states away. Her friends were old coworkers who stopped calling after she canceled too many times. Blake knew exactly how alone she was. At the hotel, he'd handed her to the event manager like luggage. "She offered to help," he joked. The manager, desperate and distracted, pushed an apron into Marissa's hands and pointed toward the bar. Now, under chandelier light, and she watched Blake glide through the crowd like a king, taking handshakes, posing for photos, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Every few minutes, his gaze snapped to her, checking that she stayed small. Then she saw it. Blake's phone, face up on the bar while he clinked glasses with Sienna. A calendar alert flashed. 12:15 VIP suite, Finalized transfer. Her name sat underneath in all caps. Before Marissa could breathe, Sienna leaned close to Blake and whispered, "After the toast, you get her signature. Tonight." Marissa had learned to measure life in small, quiet costs. An extra copay, a missed hour of sleep, a refill that couldn't wait. Her father's memory care facility billed $6,240 a month, and the last statement showed a red stamp. Past due. Some weeks he still knew her name. Other weeks he called her nurse and then begged to go home to a house that had been sold to cover the first year of his care. Her son, Liam, slept with a nebulizer on the nightstand like it was a lamp. When his chest tightened, he didn't cry. He just looked at her with wide eyes, trusting she would fix it. Marissa would have left Blake the first time he froze the joint account to teach her discipline. She would have left the first time he lost her car keys for 2 days, then found them in his suit pocket. But leaving required money, and money required access, and Blake had built the whole cage in her name. Her paycheck went into an account she couldn't touch. The debit card he'd handed her was a prepaid one with a weekly limit, and he monitored it like a parole officer. When the facility called about her dad's bill, Blake answered on speaker and said, smooth as glass, "Marissa gets confused sometimes. Send it to me." Afterward, he smiled and reminded her, "If you ever embarrass me, I'll show everyone your credit history and call you unfit." It wasn't an empty threat. 2 months ago, a collection notice arrived for a personal loan she didn't remember taking out. $18,700, signed with her name. When she confronted him, Blake didn't deny it. He just leaned close and whispered, "It's our loan, our marriage, our problem. Unless you want a judge asking why you abandoned your child with debt in your wake." So tonight, trapped behind the bar, Marissa kept pouring drinks while her stomach twisted around that voicemail preview and the keycard marked 1214. If she ran, security would stop her. If she screamed, like Blake's friends would call her hysterical. If she made a scene, she could lose her job, her only health insurance, Liam's medicine, her father's care. A server brushed past and slid a thick envelope onto the counter beside the ice well. In black marker it read, "Mrs. Harrington, signed tonight." Inside, a notary stamp glinted through the paper, and then the event manager returned with a clipboard, smiling too hard, and said, "He's waiting. Your signature is required before you can leave." The Harrington party filled the Grand Meridian Ballroom like a living magazine spread. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, and a long LED wall looping Blake's company logo beside the words, "Investor Appreciation Night." Waiters glided between linen tables with champagne flutes that cost more than Marissa's weekly grocery run. A PR crew in black shirts panned slowly, catching smiles, handshakes, and the perfect couple moments Blake liked to post. Near the stage sat a podium with a slim microphone and a teleprompter screen angled toward the speaker. Off to the right, a smaller monitor faced the event manager's desk, showing 4 security camera thumbnails: bar, service hallway, ballroom entrance, and VIP elevator. The images flickered in quiet, indifferent black and white, recording everything without caring who was powerful. Marissa could smell roasted coffee from the VIP lounge, rich and warm, mixing with the sharp bite of liquor and perfume. She stood trapped behind the bar's marble counter, boxed in by the crowd in front and the service door behind, where security kept their arms folded. Every time she shifted her weight, the hem of the apron brushed her knees like a reminder. You don't belong on the other side of the rope. Then Blake came closer, not with his usual charming grin, but with a tight jaw and eyes that didn't soften when they landed on her. He wasn't even wearing his wedding band. In its place was a plain silver ring, the kind men wore when they wanted to look unattached. He didn't speak to her directly. He leaned toward the event manager and pointed at the stage, then at the bar, then at the VIP elevator on the security monitor. The manager nodded too quickly, as if afraid to say no. Sienna watched from Blake's side, sipping sparkling water, smiling like she already owned the room. Blake lifted his phone, tapped once, and Marissa saw a file icon on his screen. Transfer packet signed. Her throat went dry, and she glanced at the service hallway camera thumbnail. In it, her own face looked pale, caught under fluorescent light. A man in a navy blazer, someone from hotel security, paused by the monitor and pressed a button, as if bookmarking the moment. Marissa's fingers tightened around the tray until the metal bit into her palm, but she didn't flinch. At that moment, the teleprompter updated with a new line under Blake's speech. "Introduce my wife, our help," before the announcement. Blake Harrington was the kind of man who could make strangers feel lucky to shake his hand. He had a practiced laugh, a spotless suit, and eyes that stayed cold even when he smiled. At home, that smile came with rules. Tonight, he moved through the ballroom collecting compliments like tips. "Blake, you've built something incredible," an investor said. Blake squeezed the man's shoulder and answered, "Just wait. Next quarter changes everything." Then his gaze slid to the bar, to Marissa in the apron, and the warmth drained away. He walked up behind her and spoke without lowering his voice. "Stand up straight," he said. "You look sloppy." He set his phone on the counter like it belonged there and tapped the screen. Her banking app flashed, showing the joint account at 0. "I transferred funds to protect us," he added, as if he were doing her a favor. "Don't start with your panic face." Marissa opened her mouth, but he cut her off with a finger lifted like a warning. "You're not ruining my night," he said softly. "If you need anything, ask the manager. I'm not having you wander around like you're confused." Confused. That was his favorite word. It made her sound unstable, untrustworthy, easy to dismiss. When she tried to pay her dad's facility bill last week and the card declined, Blake had shrugged. "Maybe you spent it," he said. "You forget things." Then he had handed her $20 and told her to learn to budget. Sienna approached, red dress glinting under the chandeliers. Blake's hand settled at the small of her back, with ownership he never showed Marissa anymore. "Everything set?" Sienna asked. Blake nodded toward the VIP elevator, then toward the sealed envelope on the bar. "Notary is upstairs," he murmured. "Once she signs, the transfer's clean. The board sees me as decisive. The merger closes. And you," he told Sienna, "walk in beside me when I make the announcement." Marissa's stomach clenched. Transfer, merger, announcement. It wasn't about love, it was about power, money, and a new story where Marissa never existed. Blake turned away, straightening his cufflinks as the PR camera swung toward the stage. He signaled the DJ to lower the music, then motioned the bartender to step aside, claiming the spotlight as his own. He lifted the microphone and the teleprompter flashed Marissa's name in bright white letters. When Blake said, "Let's give a hand to everyone who makes tonight possible," the PR camera swung toward the bar. Marissa felt every lens like heat on her skin. Kelsey, the event manager, hurried over and nudged Marissa's elbow. "Mr. Harrington wants you visible," she whispered, already sweating through her headset. "Just stand where I point, okay?" Marissa stepped to the edge of the bar, tray balanced while Blake smiled at the crowd. "Some of us marry into greatness," he continued, pausing for laughter. "And some of us serve it." He tilted his head at Marissa as if she were a punchline. That's when the other players showed themselves. Sienna drifted closer, red dress brushing Blake's sleeve, and held up her phone so Marissa could see a photo. Blake's hand on Sienna's thigh in the hotel elevator, time-stamped 8:47 p.m. Sienna's mouth curved. "You don't want this online," she murmured, loud enough for Marissa to hear over the music. Behind them, Marcus Reed, Blake's CFO, stood near the stage with a slim leather folder. He didn't look at Marissa like a person. He looked at her like a missing signature. When he caught Blake's eye, Marcus gave a small nod and tapped the folder twice. The signal was ready. A notary in a navy blazer waited by the VIP rope line, pen uncapped, stamp on a chain around her neck. I'll need her ID," the notary said to Kelsey, as if Marissa were an errand. Kelsey pointed at Marissa's purse behind the bar. "It's there," she answered quickly, desperate to please the man funding her contract. Marissa's throat tightened. They had planned this. The toast, the cameras, the envelope, the notary, the transfer packet Marcus guarded like a weapon. Even the security guard by the service door watched her hands, not Blake's. Blake leaned close, voice sweet and deadly. "You sign, you go home," he said. "You fight, and I tell everyone you stole from me." Her ring flashed under the bar lights, and she remembered the framed family photo on their kitchen counter, Blake's arm around her, Liam between them, before Blake began cropping her out of every story. The crowd applauded, not knowing they were clapping for her cage. Sienna's eyes slid over Marissa's apron, dismissive like dead weight on the room's shine. And Marcus Reed stepped forward with the folder, smiling thinly, as if her life was just paperwork. Blake didn't stop at the microphone. He came down from the stage and made a show of strolling to the bar, smiling like a host who loved his staff. "Everyone, this is Marissa," he announced, loud enough for the front tables. "She insisted on helping tonight. Isn't that sweet?" A few people clapped politely. Others stared at her apron, then at Blake's suit, trying to fit the pieces together. Blake plucked a folded dollar from his pocket and slapped it on the counter. "For your trouble," he said, then turned to the nearest investor. "Tip her if you like. She appreciates being useful." Heat rushed up Marissa's neck. She kept her eyes on the ice well, scooping cubes with hands that wanted to spill everything. Her ring caught the chandelier light, and for a second, she remembered the day Blake slid it on her finger and promised, in church, to protect their home. Tonight he was auctioning her dignity for laughs. In her purse behind the bar was Liam's inhaler and a crumpled past-due notice for her father's care. Proof she couldn't afford to walk out, even now, tonight. Sienna leaned in, perfume sharp as gin. "Careful," she whispered. "One wrong move and Blake tells them you're a thief. He already has the paperwork." Kelsey shoved a fresh tray at Marissa. "VIP table," she hissed. "Please, he's angry." Marissa walked into the crowd, hemmed in by bodies and camera phones. The VIP table was Blake's mother, 2 board members, and Marcus Reed. Blake's mother didn't look up from her champagne. "Set it down," she said, like Marissa was hired help. "And don't hover." Blake followed behind her, still smiling. "That's my girl," he said, patting Marissa's shoulder as if she were a dog. "See? Some women know their place." The board members chuckled, uneasy. Marcus opened his leather folder just enough for Marissa to glimpse the top page. Transfer of voting rights. Her name was typed in bold, with a line waiting for her signature. Marissa stepped back, trapped between the table and the crowd. She couldn't run without knocking drinks into 100 expensive laps. Then she heard Marcus murmur to the notary at the rope line. "If she refuses, we use the backup. She signed the medical power of attorney last year. We'll say she's confused." And Blake smiled at Marissa like he'd already won, because he thought she'd never heard that. Marissa set the tray down and backed behind the bar, swallowing the taste of humiliation. The music swelled again, but the room's attention stayed on her like a spotlight that wouldn't move. Kelsey slipped in through the service door with the clipboard, eyes darting. "He wants you upstairs after the next speech," she whispered. "Just sign and it's over. Please don't make this harder." Marissa's hands moved on autopilot, ice, pour, garnish, while her mind chased one thought. What did Blake need so badly that he'd shame her in public to get it? She glanced at the brass plaque bolted to the bar rail, half hidden by a floral arrangement. Premises under video and audio surveillance. Underneath, in smaller print, the hotel's policy number and a line about recordings retained for 30 days. Marissa had walked past that plaque a dozen times without noticing. Now it felt like the first honest thing in the room. A bartender named Jose caught her eye and nodded toward the ceiling dome camera. "It hears, too," he murmured, barely moving his lips. "I've seen it ruin people. Keep your face calm. Let it work." The head of security, Daniel Rourke, stood near the manager's station watching the 4-camera monitor. He wasn't smiling. His jaw tightened every time Blake drifted near the bar and every time Marissa flinched. When Marcus Reed leaned in and slid the marked keycard envelope across the counter, Daniel tapped the touchscreen and bookmarked the exact frame. A timestamp burned in the corner, 9:18:43 p.m. At the same moment, while Marissa's phone buzzed again, an email notification preview from Kelsey's event tablet that she'd left open on the counter. From Blake.Harrington at subject. Signature tonight. The body line glowed before Kelsey could snatch it away. If she refuses, tell security she's unstable and escort her. Marissa's throat went tight. Kelsey slapped the tablet face down, but not before Daniel saw it too. He reached into a drawer under the monitor, pulled out a small incident form, and began writing with slow, deliberate strokes. Possible coercion. VIP guest recorded. Then he printed a still image from the bar camera, Blake's hand on Marissa's shoulder, the notary's stamp visible in Marcus's folder. Daniel slid the printout into a plain manila envelope labeled Legal, sealed it, and clipped a flash drive to his keyring. Daniel Rourke turned to his assistant and said, "Call Ms. Sloan. Tell her I have the footage." Kelsey returned with 2 security guards and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Harrington needs you upstairs," she said, holding the clipboard like a shield. "We're behind schedule." Marissa wiped her palms on the apron. "I'm leaving," she said, keeping her voice low. One guard stepped closer. "Ma'am, you can't go through the ballroom exit," he replied, nodding toward the crowd and cameras. "VIP instructions." Kelsey lowered her voice. "Please don't do this out here. He'll say you're causing a disturbance." A disturbance. That was the word Blake liked because it sounded official. Marissa pictured her hospital badge, her son's inhaler, her dad's past due bill. One complaint and St. Agnes could cut her. One missed paycheck, and the pharmacy would refuse Liam's meds. They guided her through the service hallway, past stacked linen carts and a staff-only sign, straight into a small break room that smelled like coffee and bleach. The notary waited at the table with a stamp, Marcus Reed's folder open, pen placed exactly on the signature line. On the wall, a tiny camera blinked red. Blake walked in last and closed the door with his heel. His smile was gone. "You will sign," he said. "You'll do it quietly like a good wife, and you'll stop embarrassing me." "I want to read it," Marissa said. Marcus slid a second sheet across the table. "No time," he said. "It's standard. Refusal will be documented as non-compliance." Blake tapped his phone and turned the screen toward her. A draft email to her supervisor. A subject line already typed. Employee misconduct. Under it, an attachment labeled Incident Report. "All I have to do is hit send," Blake murmured. "Then you lose your job, your insurance, and your Little Hero Act." Marissa's throat tightened. "Why are you doing this?" Sienna's voice came from the doorway, silky. "Because you're in the way," she said. Blake leaned closer until Marissa could smell the bourbon on his breath. "Sign or I tell security you stole from the bar and tried to flee," he whispered. "They'll walk you out in handcuffs, in front of everyone, in front of Liam when I pick him up." Marissa stared at the pen, shaking. The notary uncapped the pen, waiting, eyes blank and silent. Then Blake pulled a second envelope from his jacket, already addressed to Mrs. Harrington, and slid it beside the contract like a final weapon. Young Blake slid the second envelope across the break room table like he was handing Marissa a menu. "Open it," he said. Her fingers fumbled the flap. Divorce papers, already prepared, already dated. The top page read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Underneath in bold, a request for temporary exclusive use of the marital residence and temporary sole control of accounts. It wasn't just betrayal, it was eviction in legal language. Marissa's vision blurred. "You planned this," she whispered. "Of course," Blake replied, calm as a banker. "I can't have you attached to me when I announce the merger. And I definitely can't have you attached to me when I marry someone who matters." Sienna leaned in the doorway, satisfied. Marcus tapped the signature line on the transfer packet. The notary set the stamp beside the pen like a threat. Blake didn't wait for agreement. He opened the door and nodded to the guards. "Bring her," he said. "We're doing it in front of everyone." They marched Marissa back through the service hallway and out into the ballroom. The chandeliers hit her like interrogation lights. She was still in the catering apron. Her wedding ring still sat on her finger, mocking her vows. The PR camera found her instantly because humiliation always makes good footage. Blake took the stage, microphone in hand, and smiled as the music faded. "Friends," he said, voice bright. "Tonight is about honesty." He extended his arm toward Marissa like she was a product. "Some of you have met my wife," he continued. "Some of you have only met the help." A laugh rippled through the crowd, then died when Blake lifted the divorce papers for everyone to see. I'm filing tonight," he announced. "Effective immediately, for my protection." Marissa couldn't move. Guests were packed shoulder to shoulder, security flanked her on both sides. Phones rose like a wall of glass. Somewhere in the front row, an older couple, people Blake had introduced as family friends, looked away, ashamed, as if Marissa was the one who'd broken the home. Blake leaned into the mic and delivered the final cut, smiling. "And since she likes serving so much," he said, "security will escort her out before she steals anything else." The guards reached for her elbow. Then a silver-haired woman near the board table stood up, loud enough to stop the room cold. "Don't touch her, because you're about to learn who she really is." The ballroom didn't clap this time. It shifted, chairs scraping, necklaces turning, phones rising higher. Anita Sloan stood beside the board table, silver hair pinned back, her posture straight as a judge. Her voice carried without a microphone. "Security, step away. That woman is not your problem." Blake's smile froze. He tried to laugh it off. "Anita, please, this is a private matter." Whispers raced anyway. Is she really his wife? Why is she dressed like staff? Did she steal something? Someone near the bar muttered, "Classic gold digger move," and another person snickered like they'd been waiting for permission. Marissa felt the room tilt against her. A few guests who'd chatted with her at past holidays suddenly studied their drinks. One woman who'd once called her sweetheart folded her arms and turned her chair, blocking Marissa from view like shame was contagious. Blake's mother dabbed her lips with a napkin, eyes hard, as if Marissa had inconvenienced the family. The guard still held Marissa's elbows, not tight, but firm enough to remind her she had no say. The PR camera lingered on her apron, on her ring, on the divorce papers in Blake's hand. Marissa heard the DJ whisper, "Keep rolling," and her stomach clenched. This would live online forever if Blake got his way. At the back, a man shook his head and said, "Poor Blake," as if Marissa were the disaster. A woman hissed, "Get her out before she causes a scene." Marissa searched for one friendly face and found none, only screens. Even the bartender avoided her eyes, afraid of the rich tonight too. Anita didn't move. She looked at the guards, then at Blake. "You are attempting to coerce a signature in a public venue," she said. "Yeah, and you are doing it on recorded premises." That should have helped, but the crowd only grew hungrier. People leaned forward, eager for scandal. A man in a navy suit scoffed, "If she's innocent, why is security holding her?" Another guest snapped a photo of Marissa's face, flash stinging her eyes. Marissa tried to breathe through the noise. She reached back for her purse, where Liam's inhaler and her hospital badge should have been, and felt empty air. She spun, heart pounding, and saw her purse on the bar counter. Open. Her wallet was gone, and tucked in its place was the hotel keycard envelope marked 1214, now stamped in red. Evidence. Marissa slipped through the service door while the ballroom buzzed behind her. The hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and hot trays. She pressed her back to the wall and tried to breathe, but her lungs felt too small for the shame. In the employee ladies' room, she locked herself in the last stall and sat on the closed lid, apron bunched in her fists. Tears came hard, silent, The kind that shake your shoulders but make no sound because you've trained yourself not to be a problem. She stared at her wedding ring until the metal blurred. Vows, family, protection. All of it reduced to a joke and a microphone. She pulled her purse onto her lap. It gaped open. Her wallet was gone. ID, hospital badge. The little photo of Liam missing his front tooth. In its place sat the keycard envelope marked 1214, now stamped evidence in red ink. Her hands went numb. If Blake wanted her arrested, she couldn't even prove who she was. A memory hit. Her father's voice on a good day, calling her my girl, as if she still belonged somewhere. On another, Liam wheezing at 2 a.m., trusting her hands on the nebulizer mask. She wiped her cheeks with a paper towel and tasted salt and cheap soap. "Stop," she whispered to herself. Begging had never softened Blake. Begging had only taught him where to press. She inhaled slowly, then heard the sentence form in her mind like a door locking. "I'm done begging." Marissa stood, straightened her dress under the apron, and forced her shoulders back. Outside the stall, the mirror showed a woman with red eyes and bruised pride, but still standing. She tucked the evidence envelope deep into her purse, grabbed Liam's inhaler from the side pocket, and set her ring flat against her palm, feeling its weight like a choice. From the hallway, distant applause rose, followed by sharp, angry voices. The battle was still happening out there. She was alone in here. She opened her contacts and hovered over 911, then over her sister's number in Ohio. Both felt impossible. If she called police, Blake would turn it into a headline. If she called family, she'd admit how trapped she'd been for months, all alone. Her phone lit up with an unknown number, and the text beneath it read, "I have the footage. Come to Security Office B right now." Marissa hurried out of the ladies' room, clutching her purse like it could keep her upright. The hallway lights buzzed overhead. She followed the sign for security offices, but halfway there, 2 hotel guards stepped in front of her. "Mrs. Harrington?" one asked, already knowing the answer. "I need Security Office B," she said, showing the text on her phone. The guard's eyes flicked to the screen, then away. "Mr. Harrington reported a disturbance and missing property," he said. "He asked we escort you to the front." "My wallet is missing," Marissa whispered. "He took it." The second guard lifted a radio. "We also have a call to local police on standby," he added, like it was routine. "If you resist, they'll respond." Marissa's mouth went dry. Her hospital badge was gone with her wallet. Without ID, she couldn't even prove she worked where she worked. Her phone vibrated again. "Bank alert. Account access revoked." Then another. "Pharmacy. Payment declined." A third. "St. Agnes. HR, please contact us regarding a complaint." Each buzz felt like a door slamming. She tried calling Liam, straight to voicemail. She tried her sister. No answer. She tried the memory care facility. A weary clerk picked up and said, "Miss Caldwell, we need tonight's payment or we'll have to pause services next week." Marissa stared at the stained carpet, hearing her father's confused voice in her head, asking why nobody came. From the ballroom, applause rose again, and she knew Blake was still smiling for cameras, still rewriting her as the problem. If police arrived, he'd let them lead her through the lobby in that apron. If St. Agnes believed his story, she'd lose insurance and Liam's inhalers would become a luxury. Kelsey appeared at the end of the hall, eyes wide. "He wants your ring," she whispered, urgent. "He said it's company property from the gift account. He wants it back before you leave." Marissa's fingers curled around the band, pain sharp as glass. She slid it off and the cold air hit the pale line it left behind. The guard held out his hand. Marissa placed the ring in his palm, and it looked too small to have cost her so much. The radio crackled. "Unit arriving in 2 minutes." Her knees softened. She tasted metal the way she did before fainting once. A calm voice behind her said, "Don't hand them anything else because I saw everything." The calm voice belonged to Anita Sloan, the company's general counsel. and she moved like she'd ended fights in rooms far meaner than this hallway. "I saw everything," she repeated, showing her bar card and a thin badge on a lanyard. "And so did the cameras." The guards hesitated. One lifted his radio. "Ma'am, Mr. Harrington?" "Mr. Harrington does not control this hotel," Anita cut in. Her tone stayed polite, but it left no space to argue. She nodded to Daniel Rourke, the head of security, who stood beside her with a flash drive clipped to his keys. "Police are not needed. There is no theft. There is coercion." Daniel held up his tablet. On the screen was a frozen frame from the bar camera. Marcus Reed sliding Marissa's wallet out of her open purse. A bright timestamp glowed in the corner. "It's all recorded," Daniel said. "We already saved the clips to 2 drives." Marissa's knees nearly gave out. "My wallet. He took it," she whispered. "We know," Anita said, finally looking at her the way a decent person looks at a human being. "Marissa, breathe. You are safe in this moment." She glanced at the apron. "You don't deserve any of this." The radio crackled again. "Unit in the lobby." Anita leaned in and spoke into the guard's mic with quiet authority. "Cancel the request. If an officer has questions, they can speak with me. And I'm counsel for Harrington Capital and a member of the State Bar. I will not have a woman paraded through this hotel on a lie." The guard stepped back. One swallowed hard. "Understood." Marissa pressed a hand to her bare ring finger, the pale line throbbing like a bruise. "I can't lose my job," she said. "My son, his medicine." Daniel's expression softened. "Call him," he said, offering his phone. "And after that, we're going to Security Office B. Mrs. Sloan has something you need to see." Anita reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed folder stamped, "Legal Hold." "This is just the beginning," she said. "Your husband tried to force a signature tonight for a reason." Marissa's throat tightened. "What reason?" Anita's eyes stayed steady. "Because your name is on paperwork he cannot touch without you." 10 minutes, Anita said. "You know conference room C? Daniel will bring the footage and I'll bring the file." Conference room C smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. Anita set her briefcase on the table and Daniel Rourke locked the door, then turned his tablet so Marissa could see the screen. First came the bar footage. Blake at the mic, his arm around Sienna, then the slow pan to Marissa in the apron. The audio caught every word. "Smile, sweetheart. Only job you're qualified for." Followed by laughter and the clink of glass. Daniel tapped again. A second clip showed Marcus Reed's hand slipping into Marissa's open purse, lifting her wallet and sliding it out of frame. The timestamp glowed 9:18:43 p.m. "That's theft," Daniel said, "and it proves intent." Anita opened the red-stamped keycard envelope and photographed it, front and back. "Suite 1214, she murmured. "We'll pull the elevator and hallway cameras next." She slid Marissa's phone across the table. "Play the voicemail." Marissa pressed play with shaking fingers. Sienna's voice filled the room. "Room 1214 is ready. Don't bring her." Anita's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "Adultery isn't the point," she said. "Coercion is." She laid out printed evidence like tiles. Kelsey's tablet email preview. If she refuses, tell security she's unstable and escort her. A photo of the notary stamp waiting on the break room table, and Marissa's bank alert showing access revoked within minutes of her resisting. Anita wrote dates and times in thick black ink, building a timeline anyone could follow. Daniel printed a chain of custody form and signed it, then slid Marissa a copy. Anita typed fast on her phone, was sending a legal hold notice to the hotel and a brief message to St. Agnes HR. Employee targeted at public event, evidence preserved. Marissa felt her chest loosen for the first time all night, but Anita raised one finger. "Not yet," she warned quietly. "This is what we do," Anita said, voice steady. We preserve video, we issue a legal hold, and we notify the board before Blake spins a story. She looked at Marissa. Tonight, you do not answer his calls. You go home with protection and you keep Liam close. Marissa swallowed. And the transfer papers? Anita shut the folder with a soft snap. They can't move what they don't legally control, she said. But to end him in public, we need one final piece. Anita slid a sticky note toward Daniel. Get me the sealed founder file from the company vault, before Blake gets there first. Daniel returned 20 minutes later with a gray metal lockbox held against his chest, like it weighed more than steel. A second man walked with him, Thomas Keene, the board chair, 72 white eyebrows, the kind of face that didn't bluff. He carried a sealed envelope stamped with the company vault number and signed across the flap. I pulled this myself, Keene said to Marissa, because Mr. Harrington tried to access it 5 minutes ago. Anita's pen stopped mid-note. Blake is moving, she murmured. Keene broke the seal and slid a file across the table. On the first page in clean legal print, Marissa's name appeared again and again. Marissa Caldwell, successor voting trustee, the primary beneficiary. 49% voting control held in trust until a triggering event. Marissa stared. That's not me. It is, Anita said gently. She turned the page and revealed an attached copy of Marissa's marriage certificate and her old employee records from a nonprofit hospice, signed by a man named Walter Harrington, the late founder. You cared for Walter's wife during her last year. He verified your identity and amended the trust. He didn't trust his son-in-law, Anita explained, tapping the line that named Blake as disqualified for breach of fiduciary duty if coercion is attempted. Keene leaned forward. Walter built a poison pill, he said. If anyone tried to force you to sign away voting rights, those rights lock tighter, and the board is required to remove the person attempting it. Marissa's mouth went dry. So, the transfer packet was their trap, Anita finished. Blake needs your signature to take control before the merger vote. That's why he humiliated you. That's why he brought a notary. He thought shame would make you sign fast. Daniel slid his tablet forward. And now we have the hotel footage, the voicemail, the email instructing staff to call you unstable, and Marcus stealing your wallet, he said. It's not a story, it's evidence. Anita reached across the table and covered Marissa's shaking hand with her own. Marissa, she said, voice low, you're not powerless. Marissa felt something crack open inside her, fear loosening its grip, replaced by a cold, steady clarity. What happens next? She asked. Keene's jaw tightened. We stopped the merger announcement, he said. Publicly. Anita nodded once. We go back out there, she said, unstacking the file, the flash drives, and the chain of custody forms in perfect order. Tonight, in front of witnesses. Anita picked up the microphone pass and said, We return to the ballroom now, while Blake is still on stage. Marissa stared at the trust pages until the letters stopped swimming. For years, Blake had called her forgetful, unstable, lucky he kept her. Now, a dead man's signature, a board chair's face, and 2 flash drives said the opposite. She mattered, and Blake knew it. Her phone lit again, 3 missed calls from Blake, then a text, Come back. You're making me look bad. The old Marissa would have apologized just to stop the shaking. Tonight she deleted the message, then turned the phone to silent. Anita slid a document toward her. This is your statement, she said. Simple. True. On 1 page. Marissa read the lines. Forced to serve. Coerced to sign. Wallet taken. Threats of arrest. Account frozen. Each sentence was a bruise put into clean language. I don't want revenge, Marissa whispered. Keene's eyes narrowed. This isn't revenge. This is governance. He tried to steal control. Daniel opened the lockbox again and placed the founder's letter on top, still sealed with wax. Walter wrote 1 note for you, he said. Read it when you're ready. Marissa broke the seal. The handwriting was shaky but clear. Thank you for treating my wife with dignity. If anyone tries to strip you of yours, let the record protect you. Something in Marissa's chest settled. She pulled the apron over her head and folded it neatly, like closing a chapter. In the mirror above the sink, she saw tired eyes, but also a spine she'd forgotten she had. Blake thinks shame owns me, she said, voice steadying. It doesn't, not anymore. Anita nodded once. Then we walk back with facts. No yelling, no pleading, just proof. Marissa reached into her purse and touched Liam's inhaler, the last reminder of why she'd stayed quiet. After this, she said, my son will never watch me be dragged out for a lie. She looked at the pale band mark on her finger and promised herself the next ring would be given by respect, not fear. Keene stood and offered his arm, formal as a courtroom escort. Daniel clipped the flash drives to a lanyard and handed it to Marissa. You hold the evidence, he said. They can't say it vanished. Marissa took a breath, squared her shoulders, and followed them toward the ballroom doors. On the other side, Blake's voice boomed into the microphone, announcing his new chapter, and Marissa stepped forward to take the stage back. Video title, Wife Served Drinks at Husband's Party. The room went silent. When the board revealed her real identity. In the quiet corridor outside Conference Room C, Anita handed Marissa a folded navy blazer and a small pack of tissues. No costume, she said. Walk in as yourself. Marissa slipped the blazer on over her black dress and felt her shoulders square. Daniel returned her wallet, pulled from the evidence bag after the clip proved Marcus took it, along with her hospital badge. The plastic rectangle felt like a lifeline. Keene opened his phone and sent one text to the board. Merger announcement paused. Counsel present. Stay seated. Then he looked at Marissa. You speak for 30 seconds, he said. No speeches. Just facts. Anita nodded and laid the plan out like a nurse arranging instruments. First, she would request the microphone as counsel and identify herself. Second, Keene would stand as board chair and state that an emergency governance issue required immediate attention. Third, Daniel would confirm the hotel footage was preserved under legal hold. Fourth, Marissa would say one clear line. I was forced to serve drinks and threatened to sign under duress. Then Anita would display the founder file and the trust page naming Marissa as voting trustee, with Keene confirming the signature and the vault seal. Marissa practiced the line twice, voice steady, hands still. She called Liam from Daniel's phone. Honey, I'm okay, she said. Stay with Mrs. Patel until I pick you up. Liam's small, okay mom cracked her heart, but it also hardened her resolve. Anita slid the flash drives into a labeled envelope and placed it in Marissa's hands. You hold this, she said. If Blake lunges, you step back and Keene speaks. Daniel clipped a body cam to his lapel, policy approved for VIP incidents, and tapped it on. Red light. Recording. At the ballroom doors, the music dipped again. Through the gap, Marissa heard Blake laughing into the mic, selling his new beginning like a product. Marissa inhaled, felt the blazer cuffs at her wrists, and gripped the evidence envelope like a shield made of truth. Daniel handed her a printed still of Blake holding the divorce papers, the timestamp clear. Anita tucked it behind the trust page. If he lies, we show this, she said. Keene whispered, When I speak, the board votes. Tonight ends him for good, publicly. The doors swung open, and every head turned as Marissa walked back in. No apron, no apology, and the proof in her hands. Blake was mid-laugh when Anita Sloan stepped between the podium and the PR camera. I'm Anita Sloan, General Counsel for Harrington Capital, she said into the mic, calm as a verdict. This event is paused for an emergency board notice. A wave of confusion rolled through the ballroom. Blake's smile twitched. Anita, don't? Mr. Harrington, Thomas Keene cut in, rising beside the board table. Sit down. The room went silent at the authority in his voice. Daniel Rourke walked to the manager station and nodded to the A/V tech. The LED wall changed from the company logo to security footage. Marissa in an apron, Blake's arm around Sienna, Blake's voice booming. Smile. Sweetheart, this is the only job you're qualified for. Gasps rippled. Then the clip jumped. Marcus Reed's hand sliding into Marissa's purse, lifting her wallet, the timestamp bright in the corner. Heads turned. A few guests actually stood as if standing could create distance from what they'd just watched. That footage is preserved under legal hold, Daniel said. Chain of custody is documented. Police can access it. Anita held up one page, its seal visible even from the back tables. And this, she said, is the founder's trust file from the company vault. Keene lifted his copy and faced the crowd. I retrieved it tonight. The seal is intact. The signature is Walter Harrington's. Marissa stepped forward, blazer neat, voice clear. I was forced to serve drinks and threatened to sign away control under duress, she said. They stole my wallet to trap me. Anita pointed to the clause in bold. Attempted coercion triggers automatic disqualification. Keene nodded once. As board chair, I am calling an immediate vote. Hands rose, fast, unanimous. Blake's color drained. You can't do this. We just did, Keene said. Effective now. Blake Harrington is removed as CEO. Marcus Reed is suspended pending investigation. Security will escort them out. The guards moved in, this time toward Blake. Sienna backed away, but Jose the bartender lifted a hand. He told her, sign or we call you a thief, he said, eyes fixed on the cameras above the bar. The notary swallowed and quietly closed her stamp case. Phones kept recording, but now the lens was on Blake. Keene turned to the lobby entrance. Officer, he called, we have video theft and attempted fraud. Here, on tonight, on camera. Blake lunged for the microphone and screamed, She's a fraud! Grab that file! The guards closed around Blake before his hand reached the file. Daniel stepped between him and Marissa, palm up, body calm but solid. Sir, you're done, he said. When Blake tried to shove past, the officer from the lobby grabbed his wrist and snapped on cuffs. Cameras caught Blake's face as the truth landed. Fear, then rage, then helplessness. Sienna didn't rush to defend him. She backed away, heels clicking, and whispered, I didn't sign up for this, before slipping into the crowd. Marcus Reed started to speak, but Keene pointed to the screen, still paused on the wallet theft. Save it for investigators, he said. The notary handed her stamp to hotel security without a word. Anita escorted Marissa to the microphone. State your name, she said softly. Marissa Caldwell, Marissa answered, voice steady. I'm the woman you saw serving drinks. I'm also the voting trustee the founder appointed. I didn't ask for this fight, but I'm not signing away my dignity or my child's future. The room finally exhaled. A few guests stood and applauded, not for drama, but for courage. Blake's mother stared at the floor, and one board member said, loud enough to record, We owe her an apology. By midnight, Anita had emailed St. Agnes HR the footage link and a formal statement. The complaint disappeared. Within a week, the memory care balance was paid from the trust, the loan in Marissa's name was flagged as fraud, and Blake's accounts were frozen pending charges. The board issued a public correction. Marissa was not staff. She was the legal trustee, and coercion had been reported. Marissa moved with Liam into a small townhouse near his school, safe and bright. Daniel checked the locks the first night and left a note on the counter. You did the hard part. Months later, after court orders and clean paperwork, Marissa returned the ring to a jeweler and chose a simple band for herself. No man attached, just a promise to never beg for respect again. On a quiet Sunday, Daniel met her at church steps with Liam between them and asked, Can I earn a place in your life? Marissa smiled, not desperate, not afraid, just ready. She kept her own bank card, her own keys, and her own voice. And when neighbors asked what happened, she told the truth. Keep records, trust your instincts, and never trade dignity for peace ever again. Yeah, so that's how this story closes out. And if you're still here with me right now, truly still here, then something in Marissa's fight probably touched your heart in a real way. Because the biggest lesson isn't rich people get exposed, it's this. Dignity is not something you earn from someone else. It's something you protect, even when you're tired, broke, and alone. Marissa didn't win by yelling. She won by holding on to truth, keeping records, and refusing to sign her life away under pressure. And that's a life lesson we can all use. When someone controls your money, your story, or your confidence, that's not love. That's a cage. The Stoics had a line that fits perfectly here. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can control what you do next. And that choice is where healing begins. Say another simple reminder. Self-respect is the quiet boundary that changes everything. If this ending gave you hope, please hit like, share it with someone who needs strength tonight, and subscribe to the channel. Because more stories like this are coming, and I want